So Jeff over at the Vinyl Destination YouTube channel is asking us to talk about our favorite band. So I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to talk about how I first discovered them and then got into them many years later. That's a good tale. I'm also going to talk about some collectibles. I'm going to talk some personal stories, some fan banter. It's going to be pretty cool. Now, of course, who is this band? Come on, really? Anyways, if you haven't watched this channel, I'm going to tell you momentarily. Definitely stick around. So when Jeff started this 1,000 subs contest of his, this thread response video asking for people's favorite bands, it wasn't exactly tough for me to pick one. I mean, I do love a lot of bands, but there really is one that's front and center. If you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you probably know the answer already. Of course, my favorite band is Kiss. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be talking about how I first discovered Kiss. I'm also going to be talking about how I got into them years later. There was a bit of a gap there. We'll talk about that. Also, so I'm going to be showing some collectibles. I'm going to tell some stories around those collectibles. I'm not going to show everything I have because that would be a huge video, but definitely going to talk about some of the more important stuff, and also how my interest in the hottest band in the world might have changed a little bit over the decades. So, here we go. So the date in which I discovered the band, technically, I actually have a date. It's October 28th, 1978. I was 10 years old. At the time, I was vacationing with my mom and some family in Las Vegas, Nevada, of all places, which also kind of makes sense because Kiss are a rather Vegas-y kind of band. Anyways, so I was there, and this is 1978, so Vegas is a little different than it is now. I think nowadays it's a little more Disneyfied. It's more for kids. Basically, back in the 70s, if you brought your kids to Vegas, Circus was really the only option, and there was nothing else. Everything else was casinos and shows and hookers outside of the city limits. So my mom and my family basically left me in the hotel room with an in-hotel babysitter so they could go off and do adult things. So the babysitter herself, super hot. She was like maybe late teens, early 20s, very 70s with the bell-bottom jeans and the tight little top and the all one-length hair kind of thing. Definitely hot. But she brought this box of toys, but they were toys for like little kids. I was 10 years old. I wasn't going to have blocks kind of thing. So quickly bored of that. She's trying to think of things to entertain me with, and then she says to me, hey, you know, there's this cool movie on tonight on NBC. I really want to watch. You want to watch it with me? And I'm like, maybe. So turns out it was Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. It was its debut on television, for those who don't know about this movie. TV movie, starring Kiss. Has a bit of a kind of a B-movie sci-fi plot. It's a decent movie when you're 10 years old. Has a little bit of charm to some of us Kiss fans who can kind of see the fun and the humor in it without getting all, this is not a great movie kind of thing. So the movie itself, I liked it. I wasn't into the music because I was 10 years old. In fact, I wasn't even paying attention to the music. Mostly I was watching Gene Simmons and his fire and all of that stuff and the blood and cool stuff like that. So I was into comic books at the time too, so that laid into that for me. So that was my introduction to Kiss. Again, I really didn't pay attention to the music, but the visuals were there, and they definitely caught me visually first, and I think that's the case with a lot of people. So there's my introduction to Kiss. So fast forward a year to 1979, I'm starting 6th grade, and I'm living in Winnemucca, Nevada, which is pretty much what it sounds like. I had a friend named Stephanie. Her dad and my mom worked together. So I spent a lot of weekends over there. Steph's dad was kind of a modern dad in that sense. He kind of didn't mind a boy sleeping over. More fun than that was that my girlfriend was friends with Stephanie, so my girlfriend came over every weekend and fun ensued. Whatever fun 6th graders do. So that aside, Steph had 2 older brothers who were teenagers. And they probably wanted to have nothing to do with me. And I didn't see them a lot for the most part, but they had this really cool bedroom. And I remember going in there quite a bit. It was Kiss pictures all over the walls and the ceiling. I mean, wall to wall everywhere. It was amazing. And I would just stare at these photos of, like, you know, Gene Simmons and the blood and the fire and the cool guitars and all that stuff. And still hadn't really consciously heard much of their music, but again, visually, they're amazing. Years later, I would emulate this anyways as a teenager. I had my own Kiss room of hundreds and hundreds of pictures taped all over the walls and the ceiling. I don't know how I kept them up there. But that was definitely yet another introduction to Kiss, at least visually. So fast forward to December of 1983. I'm 15 years old, living in the city, getting into metal, having a good time. Hadn't heard Kiss much, even up to this point. It's kind of funny. So I'm over at my friend Mike's house, and Mike has cable, unlike me. I never got to see cable much up until that point. He didn't have MTV, but he did have Night Flight. And we saw a special on Kiss. There was a 3-segment thing going on where there was an interview with the Creatures of the Night lineup. Then there was the video for I Love It Loud, and then there's a video for Lick It Up. And all 3 of them were huge revelations to me because in the first thing, I'm like, where are Ace and Peter? And my friend explains it to me. And then the I Love It Loud video comes, and I'm like, when did Kiss go metal? And he explains that to me. And then, of course, Lick It Up, the biggest surprise is they took the makeup off. And I ask him what happened, and he tells me that as well. Because clearly I lived under a rock for many years as a kid. I was very sheltered. It's a thing. So really excited about this music. I remember going off about that to him. I had discovered some other metal bands, much more metal bands, let's be honest, before this. So I had this revelation that night that heavy metal was really the music I loved. It was really a thing. I felt really passionate about it. Told him that. He just looked at me like I was nuts. So the next day, I went out and I bought Lick It Up and Creatures of the Night. In fact, I still have the cassettes to this day. This is the same tape I bought. And of course, there is Lick It Up. Very excited to get these 2 tapes. I listened to them over and over again, wore them down like you wouldn't believe. And that's when the sound of Kiss really came into being for me, and I got into them. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I was an 80s metal kid, and these 2 albums are probably the most metal thing they've ever put out. So they came out at the right time for me. It worked out perfectly. So at this point, I had heard the modern Kiss, but I was very curious about 70s Kiss. I still hadn't really consciously heard them. So as luck would have it, my aunt went off to college a few years before. She left a bunch of stuff behind. One thing she left behind was this Love Gun 8-track, which I still have to this day. And this was my first taste, consciously again, of 70s Kiss. It's an 8-track tape. For those who don't remember them, it's probably better that you forget all about them because they're pretty awful. But the thing about the tracks themselves is that half the song will end up on one track and the other half will end up on the other. That happens twice on this one with Got Love for Sale and Hooligan. Funny thing about that is that I still have those track changes in my head when I hear this album. I just can't get away from it. So the song will be going and the solo kicks in and I hear this chunk chunk and then the song continues on the next track. These things are awful. I know people who love them. I know one Kiss fan in particular on YouTube who loves these things. It's not for me. But Love Gun, probably my first classic Kiss album that I got to hear, regardless of format. I did go out and buy the vinyl like maybe a month or 2 later, but pretty cool. My aunt also left behind another little collectible. This is the Rock and Roll All Night single. This is the one that came out in support of Alive, not the one that came out for Dress to Kill. This is the live version on the A side and the studio version on the B side. It's in pretty good shape. Really psyched to have this. It's my only Kiss 7-inch. I have a bunch of 12 inches from the 80s, but still very cool to have this. She also gave me the ticket stub to when she saw the Destroyer tour, which I was totally jealous of, at least later in life. I don't know where that ticket stub is. I have it somewhere in this apartment. I'll find it one day. But it's interesting. You know, my aunt unfortunately died of cancer last year, so these are kind of memories I have of her, but they're also early memories of discovering Kiss. So they're kind of intertwined, and I do have her to thank on some level for at least inadvertently making it so I could get into Kiss. So that's a thing, and yeah. So 1984 rolls around, getting more and more into Kiss, getting more other bands, heavier bands as well. I mean, this is probably when thrash metal was coming in for me as well. And I really wanted to be in a band. I was really excited about the idea of that, and the number one instrument I had to pick, you know, because it's the one Gene Simmons played was bass. In fact, I have 3 basses. This is my PV Fury here. This is my first of 3 basses. I also have an EB3 modern version, not the Jack Bruce 60s model. And I also have a BC Rich Warlock. And you've probably seen those in episodes of the Vinyl Reacquisition Project. They're usually over there or over there. I can't remember which. So bass playing, pretty cool. The thing about that was that I couldn't have picked a more simpler bass player to begin learning bass from than Gene Simmons. I mean, Love the guy, but his bass playing is, let's be real, rudimentary. It's pretty easy stuff. And I didn't pick it that way, but of course I wanted to be Gene Simmons on bass. So I did take bass lessons. I took about half a dozen of them, learned some scales, I learned some other stuff, learned the usual stuff you learn. The teacher was a jerk off, hated him. He hated metal. We didn't get along. So I stopped doing lessons and I just sort of learned on my own for a while. But Gene Simmons is the reason I picked up the bass guitar, which is kind of funny. Short aside, one of the songs I learned back then was War Machine. It's off Creatures of the Night. And I learned many years later that my bass teacher taught me the wrong key that the song is in. I assumed, and he assumed, for no reason whatsoever, that the song was in standard tuning. It isn't. It's an E flat. It's drop tuned a half step. And I found this out because I was listening to the tape a little more carefully, and then I looked up some sheet music, some tab, and everyone's saying, no, it's drop tuned. So I played it that way, and all of a sudden it sounded right. And I'm like, that stupid teacher taught me the wrong key. I hate him even more, even from decades in the future. So, little aside. So fast forward 1 year later to 1985. I'm seeing my first Kiss concert, March 28th, 1985 in Springfield, Massachusetts with Wasp opening. Wasp was on their first tour. Kiss was on Animalize. Wasp were amazing. This is definitely the Tony Richards era. Also, Blackie's throwing meat at the audience and the Tormentor rack is there and all of that. Amazing show. Cooler than that was that I actually met Eric Carr that night. The venue itself doubled as a sports arena, so there were seats behind the stage, and they were cordoned off with velvet ropes, which were easy to crawl under. So I snuck back there. I did it during one of the isolated solos, either Gene's or Paul's, because I figured other people would be backstage. Sure enough, Eric Carr's back there, and he's blow-drying his hair upside down, probably on the cool setting. And I was like, hey, Eric, what's up? You know, freaking out as a 16-year-old kid. He's like, hey, how you doing? And that's my meeting of Eric Carr. It's not the greatest story in the world, but pretty cool. Of course, we know Eric Carr died 6 years later. Highly unfortunate. Probably my very favorite Kiss drummer. So cool that I got to meet him. So somewhere later that year, 1985, and definitely in 86, I was getting into Kiss fanzines. A lot of people don't know about fanzines. They're small press publications. Fans make them. There's a lot of cut and paste back then, a lot of typewriter text. They're pretty fun. Sometimes you get interviews, sometimes you get pictures. Some of them are in color. And I've subscribed to a bunch of them. A lot of them had bootlegs for sale in the back, which I readily acquired. In fact, I have a bunch of them right here, all on cassette. I didn't have any vinyl bootlegs back then, but pretty cool to still have these. The funny thing about one in particular is this Live in Detroit one. I was sitting there and I'm like, why does Live in Detroit sound so familiar? I mean, listening to it, of course, but the title and the city and whatever. And then I realized that it's basically a bootleg of this. This is Kiss Live, Uncensored, Animalize Tour. It's Detroit 84. Why did I buy a bootleg of it? I don't even know. But there's that. Also, of course, if you're interested in Kiss fanzines, you should probably check out this book. It is amazing. I'm sure the zines that I subscribed to back then are in here, though I can't remember a single title. It's been forever, and I'm old. But cool book. It is called The Ultimate Kiss Fanzine Phenomenon. Great book. So I'm not going to go into too many more collectibles. I did want to talk about one I acquired back in 1988 at a record store in Denver, Colorado. Can't remember the name of it. Don't think it was Wax Trax Records. But I was in the store, and in the jewel case, they had a couple tour books, one for Love Gun and one for Destroyer. They were $15 a piece, and I only had $20 on me, so I had to choose. I did choose Love Gun. In fact, I actually framed it right here. I work in print production, so one of the things we do is we frame stuff, and I had this frame custom made because it's a weird size. But this also protects it quite well. I've looked at it a zillion times. It's in pretty good shape. Love Gun being one of the more memorable tours of Kiss. I do want to talk about something else about this, though. I was talking to the clerk at the record store, and I was like, $15 is pretty cheap. I mean, even in 1988, that was pretty cheap. And I was like, is this on consignment or something? He's like, yeah, customers consigning it through us. And I'm like, why do I feel like this customer might have a bit of a drug problem? And he's like, no, he's a junkie. He's looking for money to support his habit. And I'm like, well, I guess I contributed to that, didn't I? So that's the legacy of my Love Gun tour book. Crazy. So fast forward to the modern day, things are a bit different for Kiss. Of course, they went and put the makeup back on. They did a reunion era tour, which they're kind of still doing. The final tour probably at this point. Am I excited about that lineup? I don't know. I mean, you could say, well, it's fake Ace and fake Peter. And, that's okay. I think Eric Singer's an amazing drummer. Second best drummer Kiss has ever had. Tommy Thayer, I'm kind of unsure. He's decent. I liked him in Black and Blue. I bought the first album. It's good. But things started to degrade a little bit. Obviously, Paul Stanley's voice is a big thing. It's going. I think it's a really smart move for him to do things like Soul Station. That's his Motown Philly soul band he's doing on the side and may end up his permanent band after Kiss finally breaks up. His voice is in a lower register there. I think it makes more sense there because he doesn't have to do those high rock and roll screams anymore, which he clearly can't pull off. Let's be honest. I mean, Gene Simmons' voice sounds better these days, and that's weird because you would have thought the other way around. But so yeah, and those last two albums I wasn't a big fan of. I don't listen to them almost at all. Still a fan though. I still love the theatricality of the band. I still love the ridiculous lyrics, occasionally ridiculous lyrics. I still love their life attitude, going after what you want. I think that was really important to me growing up quite a bit. And still is to this day. I kind of think about that when I do my media projects and all the other things I do. I have many things on many back burners, as some know. So yeah, still love the band to this day, warts and all. And that's my answer to Jeff Whitcher's Vinyl Destination 1000 Subs contest question on what my favorite band is. Again, you should check out Jeff's channel. It's pretty cool. He does a number of things. He does 80s pop, he does classic rock, he does prog. He's a big Beatles fan. Heck, he even has a few Kiss videos, which, by the way, you should check out. Of course, you should also check out Jeff's original video for this contest. I'll put a link to it in the description of my video. Go check that out. Of course, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you might have noticed that there was a relative lack of vinyl in this particular video. That's because I am planning to do a Kiss vinyl collection video one day in the future. Whatever form that takes, we'll find out, but that's what I'm saving it for. So check in for that whenever the hell I do it. Of course, I'm willing to bet that you have a favorite band. Maybe it's Kiss, maybe it isn't. You should definitely let me know in the comments. Also, any cool stories you have associated with the band. Maybe you were young, maybe you were not so young. Let me know all of that and anything else relevant in the comments below. Of course, if this is your first time here, hey, my name is Matt. I run the Accusation Network. I do a channel on metal vinyl collecting. I do videos each and every week on that very subject. I do a lot of different shows in and around metal vinyl collecting. Check out the playlists. Check out all those shows. I think you'll dig them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.